Ace Magashule's former personal assistant, Moroadi Cholota, is expected to make her first appearance in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court tomorrow. Cholota arrived in South Africa on Thursday night after being extradited from the United States. She will face fraud and corruption charges linked to the 255 million rand Free State asbestos scandal. Newzroom Afrika's Bonile Khanyi has the details.
Moroadi Cholota's arrival on Thursday night marked the end of a 3-year battle to get her back to South Africa. Cholota was Ace Magashule's personal assistant during his tenure as Free State Premier before she left to study in the USA. She was meant to be a key witness for the state in the 255 million rand Free State asbestos scandal, in which her boss was allegedly involved. But then she changed her mind. The National Prosecuting Authority then decided to charge her as a fellow accused. They issued a warrant for her arrest.
The SAPS's Interpol Extradition Unit, we have been working on this particular case for quite some time, since 2021. So in 2021, we received an extradition request from the NPA, which was accompanied by a warrant of arrest, which included the charges that this particular suspect is facing. As Interpol, we immediately published a red notice. A red notice is an international alert of a wanted fugitive or a wanted suspect.
But Cholota tried to stop the extradition and failed after a US District Court found the NPA had produced sufficient evidence.
I can confirm to you that on the 1st of August, we received what we call a surrendering warrant, which is an order which is given that the fugitive can return to the country where they are wanted. We were given a time frame, 7 days, for her to be extradited. So the National Commissioner immediately dispatched a team from South Africa to ensure that they fetch this particular suspect.
Cholota faces charges of fraud, corruption and money laundering. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I am Bonile Khanyi.
So let's get a sense of what is expected to when she appears in court tomorrow and going forward from legal analyst Ahmed Ghani attorneys. Kevin Smith, welcome. Thank you for joining us on Newzroom Afrika.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Well, firstly, before we get into the conversation, let's maybe just paint a picture, help us understand the kind of extradition process that would exist between South Africa and the United States.
Oh, correct. Well, we have an extradition agreement with the USA that's been in place since 1999. And what happens when you have an extradition, the basis of extradition as a whole is that one sovereign state doesn't interfere with the domestic affairs of another sovereign state. So us as South Africa, we can't go into foreign lands and, so to speak, kidnap someone that we feel is a criminal to bring them to justice in our home country. So what we have to do is we have to request that that country performs in terms of their internal domestic laws and arrest, and they then hand that person over to us, which is what has been taking place here. So we had given the United States a request for extradition. We had also, importantly, given the United States various documentation, affidavits, reports, and statements proving that there is a case for Ms. Cholota to come answer in South Africa, where a judge in Maryland had to then deliberate and see, is she chargeable? Is there sufficient evidence to know that this is the person that we are looking for? And does she have a case to come and face here? It's important to note that they haven't deliberated on the merits, but they had to establish whether there's sufficient cause for an arrest. And then the US Secretary of State then has to approve the extradition. And that's what has taken place. And that's how she has finally come and been handed over to South Africa.
All right, let's expand more on that. When you say sufficient cause for her to be extradited, what role is she expected to play in the case against Ace? And why was it necessary to extradite her?
The issue actually stems from the fact that there was an agreement for her to testify on behalf of the state, so she would have been a normal witness in this case. However, after a couple of interviews and deliberations with the state over the last 2 to 3 years had taken place, she then has decided not to testify in this case. And because there's sufficient evidence implicating her in the crimes that not just herself, but the other 17 co-accused have been charged with, she's now implicated as a co-accused herself, not only because she has refused to testify or she hasn't cooperated with the state, but because there's sufficient evidence against her in particular. So even had she had been a witness at this point, there would still be implicating evidence, as we have seen in the Zondo Commission when she did testify there. So it is now an issue where the state, in doing its job, in bringing this matter to trial, they have to make sure that all people who can be implicated are in fact brought to justice. And because of her role and her closeness to Mr. Magashule, she now has a case to answer. Whether the state pursues that to its finality or not is something yet to be seen. But on the face of the evidence that they have against her, she has herself a case to answer.
Kevin, what charges will she face in court tomorrow?
She will face 5 charges, amongst of which would be fraud, corruption, racketeering. But it's important to note that tomorrow is her first appearance, so not much will be done on the merits. What has to happen tomorrow is that she has to be formally charged, and then she has to come forward for bail. And then the state has to either oppose that bail or not. They haven't made it clear yet whether they will be opposing that bail. But in opposing her bail, of course, there will be considerations whether it's in the interest of justice. Is she in particular a flight risk, which I think would be the most important thing that they would bring to the court's attention in order to oppose that bail. Because we have seen she has left the country, even though she had left the country formally and she wasn't necessarily in the United States to escape these charges. But it can be brought forward that she might be a flight risk, or that she might tamper with other co-accused, other witnesses, tamper with evidence. There's a myriad of things that might come to the court's attention. But for purposes of tomorrow, the main focus would be to formalize the charges and to make sure that she can actually stand for bail.
On that note, are there any potential loopholes or defenses that her legal team might exploit?
For purposes of the bail itself, there wouldn't be much by way of loopholes or technicalities, because right now they just have to show that it would be in the interest of justice for her not to be in police custody until the date of trial. So it would just be a formal process on a factual nexus to say that, look, she will be cooperating. She will come forward when the next trial date comes forward in April next year. And there's no risk of her either leaving the country or interfering with the case or interfering with witnesses. So those would be the types of things that a legal team might bring forward for purposes of tomorrow in particular.
And then based on the evidence and testimony that has been made public so far, does the state have a strong case against Moroadi and Ace?
It's actually important that you bring this up, and that's on the basis of the extradition request. Because like I said earlier, in terms of the extradition request, they had submitted a lot of evidence to the United States already in order to induce the extradition in the first place. So it's clear that they do have quite a bit of evidence, not just against her, but against all of the accused. Now, to the extent that the role that she played in this case, that might change the dynamic in terms of which she is actually prosecuted, or if she then chooses to change her mind and actually become a state witness in terms of Section 204 of the Criminal Procedure Act. That's still yet to be seen. But on the basis of public information that we do know, and on the information given in order to have her extradited, even without us having the docket in front of us, we do know that there is sufficient evidence against her.
And let's speak about that evidence. Are there any other key witnesses or evidence that might be presented in court tomorrow?
For purposes of tomorrow, remember that we're dealing with her civil liberty, meaning that we're dealing with her bail application. So most of the evidence against her will be with hers in particular. However, when we do come to trial next year in April, that's when a lot of the other information and other evidence will come to light. But for purposes of tomorrow, it's more just to ensure that the court understands why the bail will or will not be opposed, what will be the bail amount, and other bail conditions that you might have to be put in place. There could be things like she has to report to the police every week, every month, just to ensure that she's not making an attempt to leave, making an attempt to interfere. So it will be on the basis of those types of technicalities.
And what are the potential outcomes of the court proceedings on Monday, and how might this affect the broader investigation into state capture and corruption?
Based on what could take place tomorrow, she might be denied bail on the basis that, like what I've mentioned before, she might be a flight risk, which is the most important thing in a case of this nature, where someone could stand trial for such vast charges and for such widely implicating charges. However, what then becomes important in a case of this nature is if she then chooses to become a state witness, and if the state in fact actually has appetite to have her as a state witness, because at this point she is unreliable as a witness because she has at some point agreed and then she has reneged on the agreement for her to become a state witness. So those will be the things that become very much important. But we have to bear one thing in mind. To the extent that she was a witness, it's to corroborate evidence that the state already has against not just herself, but against the other co-accused as well. So it's not to say that the state's case hinges on her testimony. It's just that her testimony will corroborate evidence that they already have. So to the extent that she then becomes a witness, it just strengthens the case that they already have, which we have already seen is in fact a strong case as it stands. So her testimony, because it's going to be an implicating testimony, that's going to be the thing that she and her legal team need to consider in order to make sure that she either does not stand trial or she can become a witness and then give the testimony necessary for the main accused to actually be brought to justice.
All right, let's expand on that. What other legal challenges or investigations is Ace Magashule facing, and how will this extradition impact those cases?
The extradition is just to bring this specific co-accused in the country so she can stand trial. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a proclamation on any of the merits, even in terms of her own case, because we have to understand that all of the co-accused are innocent until proven guilty. But the state has made a case to ensure that either she as a cooperating witness, if she chooses to become one, or she as a co-accused is necessary for this case to go forward, because they have to not only bring a case against one or two particular individuals, but the investigation has actually unearthed the fact that there are 17 other co-accused that should also have a case to answer to. And that is why this extradition is part and parcel of the fabric of the entire case. It's not necessarily to have one or two co-accused brought to justice, but it's because the evidence that they already have shows that there are a multitude of people involved, and that multitude of people have to now stand trial.
How likely is it that Moroadi will be freed on bail?
The likelihood depends on what the opposition of the bail might be. The NPA has said that they are not clear yet whether they will or will not be opposing that bill. If they don't oppose the bill, then it's at the court's discretion whether it's in the interest of justice or if there are other extenuating circumstances that require for her not to have bail or require for her to have bail. So that's yet to be seen tomorrow if an opposition is actually brought by the NPA. But from my understanding of this matter, the biggest thing would be whether she is a flight risk or whether she will have any interference from either the other co-accused or if she herself will interfere with evidence or other witnesses. Those would be the biggest factors that could have an implication on a bail hearing tomorrow.
All right, Kevin, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise.
Thanks, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
All right, so that was legal analyst and partner at the Ahmed Ghani attorneys, Kevin Smith, just weighing in on the case of Ace Magashule's former personal assistant, Moroadi Cholota, who is appearing in court tomorrow.